one of the main reasons that DisCo is important is it's allowing people with disability to utilise their skills and expertise for the first time for many people, and it's there to like drive a culture change amongst organisations within our community. So it's important because for many people, people with disability and their expertise isn't valued, and so this is trying to create a market, or will create a market where the skills and expertise of people with a lived experience of disability is valued and is in demand.
I think the way that DisCo will bring lived experience into consultancy work is that it's easy for an organisation to engage with a consultant who will be paid to tell the organisation what the organisation wants to hear. Often the real voice of people with disability is too easily overlooked, and it's not seen as relevant. But to hear from a consultant or a group of consultants who really understand from first-hand experience what is needed to see real change can be the real difference in how that engagement works. The effectiveness of being able to say to an organisation, when you do this, I feel excluded, and this is why. And it's not just me, it's other peers that I know. That can have a profound impact and really provide organisations with genuine direction and ideas about when I do overlook the needs of people with disability, it actually has an impact, and it has an impact on people.
Our scope is genuinely any organisation that has either an outward-facing population that comes into their organisation of people with disability, or the people that work within their organisation. So it is disability service providers, definitely, because if disability service providers are thinking more about inclusion and more about support for decision making and really putting people with disability that they're supporting at the forefront of the decisions they make, rather than getting caught up in the process of being busy, which all too often happens when we're caught in those funding restraints and the things that we need to do. We overlook the main reason that we're here, which is to support people with disability. But for organisations, any organisation, whether it be tourism, hospitality, whether it be any sort of provider of services in the community, where people with disability come into your service or come into contact with or are seeking employment with your service or your organisation, to know how to do that better and to engage in a way that is meaningful and genuinely inclusive. That's what we're here to help with.
The status quo for seeking advice and comment from people with disability, organisations will generally bring in someone a person with a disability at the last moment. So after a lot of the decision making has already been done, and so the person with a disability is there as basically a bit of a review from a disability perspective. But what that means is that the likelihood of real change to that initial proposal or that initial design is unlikely, because so much of the process has already been put in motion, and all they're really after is a person with a disability go, yeah, that looks fine, we're happy with that, or maybe slight alterations around the edges, but no real meaningful change to it. Also, quite often the person with disability is selected for, I guess, their just as an individual perspective, whereas the difference between that and the lived experience consultants at DisCo is that they bring a real, what we call the we of the community. So it's a greater understanding around what it means to be part of a disability community, as opposed to just an individual perspective on the proposal. And so I think that's the kind of real point of difference in that space. Also, the views and input of people with disability is consistently undervalued and seen as something that is nice to have, but if it doesn't really happen, then there's not really any harm done. And we see that in the way compensation is provided to people with disability who are, used in that capacity. So it might be, a nice lunch or a gift card for $50. It's not really appropriately compensated the time, effort and expertise that the person brings to the table.
I think adding to what Dave was saying is that one of the things that we will say here at CEDA is that unfortunately if people don't pay for it, they don't value it. And that is that if a person with disability is asked to come in and consult or to support co-design of any sort of initiative, it's often coming in at the back end, not at the front end, which is less than helpful and often means that we've already decided what we want to see happen. And as Dave says, we're trying to almost get that voice of disability to rubber stamp what we already think we know. And I think the fact that we don't pay for it and we bring it in late also means that we can dismiss it if it doesn't sit in with our plans. And I think that that's where the lack of genuineness in co-design often happens, and while we often sort of feel that co-design is not really a genuine process, and in order for it to be a genuine process, it needs to be at the conception of an idea, not at the point of sale. I don't know about you, Dave, but I think that the point of co-design, and where does co-design start and where does it stop? As we said earlier, co-design should always start at the point of concept, and it doesn't really stop, because I think that if we continue to have the conversations, and if those conversations are full and fair, and at a point where we're meeting in influence on the way that we not just design a process, but also design the outcomes and the procedures of that. So we can have great ideas together, but if they don't flow through an organisation at all the levels of the organisation, then we don't really see any sort of real finished product. Because it's great to say we consulted, but then we moved on and it fell flat because it didn't get finished.
Yeah. And I also think that co-design, like any good project or any good policy, is constantly moving and evolving as well. And so for good policy, it's not let's build it and then it's started and implemented and then we don't touch it ever again. It's just constantly reviewing. So even in a review phase, co-design is critical in that, because it gives both parties, or all parties I should say, opportunity to reflect on what worked and what didn't work, and to work together to make it even better next time.
Yeah, and I think one of the coolest things that comes from that is that we talk about employment for people with disability, and I think co-design grows and flourishes in an organisation where we start to see co-designing of employment strategies to include people with disability at all levels of decision making in an organisation, which means that co-design happens within as well. And it doesn't become that piece of work we do that's other. It's actually part of the way we do business on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. The work that DisCo is looking to do, CEDA as a standalone organisation has already done significant work in that space. Now, the difference though is that I guess this is the first time CEDA has looked at creating a fee-for-service, a genuine fee-for-service arm. Quite often we are asked for our expertise in our advice by government agencies, by industry, and by broader community groups. And while that's great, and we really appreciate the opportunities, we also felt and got to a point where for this work to be most effective and for it to be to get the most bang for our buck is to actually create a fee structure and skilled members of the disability community to be change consultants. And so that's the difference. So the stuff that we've done is, we've consulted with the Department of Health. I've been brought in to talk to community groups previously, to local government, to state and federal authorities as well. So this consultative aspect isn't new to CEDA and CEDA's members. What is new is just that the professional aspect and that acknowledgement of the real expertise that people with disability bring and being compensated for that expertise.
And I think on that, Dave, one of the things that really about professionalising that and about it being a fee for service is that any surplus that comes after paying for CEDA consultants and DisCo consultants to do the work that they do comes back into the organisation to train other peers to come into this same space.
Yep.
So
building a peer movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So building a peer movement that also then works to build a more inclusive society. So I do genuinely believe that if we don't pay for it, it will stay tokenism. And if it's tokenistic, then we can turn it off whenever we like. It's amazing when we pay our accountant, or we pay for lawyers, or we pay for a HR expert to come into our organisation, we value their expertise, we value the advice we're given, and we tend to act on it. When we get somebody to come in who is seen as an expert in their space, and that space is inclusion, if we're not paying for it, unfortunately we can dismiss it whenever we see fit because we don't value it as a skill. I think also that when it comes into this space, it's really very much about, you know, what's the purpose of change, and it's also not that goodwill model either. And the goodwill of, well, if I engage with people with disability to come and do this work, I feel good about myself because I've done that. It's not about that, because I've heard organisation leaders express that, you know, there's nothing in this for us, but we just want to give something back. It's much more than that. It's the fact that more than 20% of the general population are people with disability. Your customers are potentially people with disability. The people in your workforce are potentially people with disability, whether they declare it or not. There is a very good chance that a number of people that you're in close contact with, either as customers or workforce, are people with disability. It actually makes economic sense that if a person with a disability is a member of your team and they feel included, and they feel that this is a safe work environment, then you're going to get much more productivity out of that worker. So it's not a feel-good story. It is actually about every Australian citizen having their share of what's fair.
A part of and that's absolutely correct in what Andrew's saying, and then the flip side of the coin is about the workforce as well, the disability workforce. And for a number of people who have felt disempowered, who have felt that their voice doesn't matter, that their contribution to society is less than, for that contribution to be honoured in full and appropriate wages, changes that person's mindset about how they not only see their own the work that they do, but themselves as individuals as well. It builds that confidence level of, I am an expert in this field. My voice is valued. What I have to contribute to my society is worth something. And and for many people with disability, that low expectations, that soft bigotry of low expectations that people with disability experience is all encompassing. And so to break that cycle, it is about getting people with a disability real work that they feel is valuable and that they are valued and they have expertise in.
As that happens to the individual with disability and they feel more enabled and more able to participate in society on an equal footing. The same is said that society in general grows and has a much better understanding of what is inclusion.
Yeah.
And of the contributions of people with disability, rather than being seen as a charity or
the other.
The other.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lived experience inclusion consultant is a person who has their own personal experience of living with a disability, the traumas that come with that, the trials that come with that, the triumphs that come with that. And that awareness that they're not alone and being part of a network of other people with disability and understanding that it's not just my journey, as Dave said, it's we, not me. And people who are able to share that experience and their own personal story and their own personal journey to support change, not to be seen as an inspiration and not to be seen as, poor me, it's hard. It's much more about what is possible. When the door is opened and people are able to be included genuinely and not patronised, not tokenised, but genuinely included in broader decision making, in employment, in all facets of society, then we become a much more vibrant society. So those lived experiences, and as consultants, for people to be able to tell their story and know that in doing so, that change can happen. And I think that to me is so validating for all parties.
Got nothing to add to that. That's perfect. What do you want from me? How do people with disabilities get involved in DisCo? Well, the first thing is become a member of CEDA, right? That's a critical first step. So becoming a member of Community Disability Alliance Hunter, and then go through some training around around the beliefs and values that underpin CEDA. So that's around peer support and peer mentoring. Those are the real critical aspects to that. Getting involved in CEDA activities as well is critical, a critical step towards becoming part of DisCo. And that means, you might want to join a peer group or start a new peer group, or get involved in the variety of activities that CEDA holds very regularly. After that, if you want to be a part of DisCo, then you can apply to be to be a part of DisCo, and then go through our DisCo training modules, and you'll be well on your way to being a lived experience consultant.
And I think adding to that too, Dave, is that a couple of steps. One is that the reason that we go through that journey prior to coming to DisCo is what we were saying before about it's we, not me. Our own personal journey with disability is one thing, but when we're talking collectively, it's a much stronger voice. And so understanding what a peer movement is, and understanding that when I'm representing CEDA or other people with disability, I can talk with more authenticity than just on my own. And I think the other side of it too is that when you were talking about being able to go through training and then seeing if you're interested in DisCo work, it's also about matching the right peer with the right job.
Yeah.
So ensuring that if my lived experience is a good fit for what a potential customer is looking for, and we think that that is the right space for me as an individual to work in, then that's a good fit. And so, and that's where the support around that is. So we're not going to throw people into situations where it's too hard and it's too big.
No.
So.
A peer is a person with their own lived experience of disability for this context.
It really depends on how much a person is interested in contributing. It also depends on where the work is. We can't magic work if we're not getting work. It's the nature of consultancy. I've worked as a consultant previously, and there are times when you've got so much work that you don't know what to do, and other times when there's no work. And that really comes down to when you engage. Also, if it's the right fit for you on the right job. I have certain skills that fit particular types of work, but there are other jobs that another peer may be better suited to. It's not really about whether it's a career or I'm going to get a job at DisCo. It is so much more about why does DisCo exist? DisCo exists to create change. So it is a great opportunity for peers to be paid for the work that they do, and paid well, but it is also a great opportunity for peers to be actively involved in change. So to me, I think that is probably, and I really want to emphasise that is the real strength of DisCo, is as much as getting paid is great, and we all want to get paid. But also I think on that there are also opportunities that to be working as a lived experience consultant, means that your exposure to organisations and your exposure to the workforces that you may want to get involved in is also increased dramatically. So you may want to look for work with a customer that we're working with, and it might be DisCo may create avenues to full-time work elsewhere. So it can be a pathway to employment, but it's definitely a pathway to cultural change.
It's worthwhile pointing out that DisCo is not a DES provider. No, it's not a disability employment service, right? That's not the role of it. It is absolutely a disability consulting organisation. So we're not there to put people into roles. We're there to build a workforce of people with lived experience to then do culture change out in the community. That's the real big distinction between us and other organisations out there.
Matching peers to the work.
Yeah. Is it a fun job? It's an interesting job. It can be fun, absolutely. It is one of those things where it's rewarding. I think, Jared, is probably the word I would use. It allows you to work in totally different environments. One workplace is very rarely the same as any other workplace, right? So the diversity of workplaces is something that's really appealing to people. The types of people that you work with in consultancy can vary wildly as well, and so that's an attractive aspect of it for me. And just being able to work within different industries, everything from hospitality to local government to work safety to child protection. The types of organisations I've had the opportunity to work with has been quite substantial now, and you're learning stuff and getting new experiences from every time you engage with those organisations. So I really love the work, and it's incredibly rewarding.
I think too that as well, Dave, one of the things that I think that makes it rewarding is that we're very clear when we engage with an organisation that the work we do is not tokenistic. It is not a rubber stamp.
Yeah.
It's not about, we engage with people with disability and we'll go back around our business and say we engaged. If we don't see that there's a genuine intention for change, and which is why we call it cultural change consultancy, is that if we don't feel that there's that level of genuine interest and genuine intent to see change, then we do reserve the right to disengage, because we know that telling your personal story for change is not easy work. And that is the challenging part of it at times. And the CEDA and DisCo definitely have the supports in place to support any peer that's engaged in this work. But if we feel that people are telling their story for change, but that isn't reciprocated by the organisation we work with, then we reserve the right to disengage, to support our peers, to make sure that people aren't burnt out by the work they do, because it's hard work. Very much depending on that pre-negotiation with an organisation. So you're right about the first part. You pick up the phone, you call Dave, you call Andrew, our numbers will be provided. You call us, we have a pre-consultation, we really talk through what it is that you're looking to see change, find out more about the structure of your organisation, where you see that, if you're contacting us, then there's obviously an interest in seeing cultural change. So it really is about going through the steps of what it takes, depending on the structure of your organisation, to where the layers of change need to be. Because you can say, we'll train our team, our workplace team, to be more inclusive. But if that's not supported by our HR department, if it's not supported by research and development, if it's not supported by middle management, and there's a crack in that chain, then it's not as strong as it could be, and it rarely it tends to dilute, and we don't get the long-term outcomes. Whereas if you've got an organisation where the CEO's on board, where the board are on board, where all of the different layers of the organisation get it and understand what real change looks like. We go in, we'll do an audit, like a full service audit to support where we think real change can happen. And it's not a quick process. It's about taking the time to do it well, and also being able to come back and sort of validate where it's working and where it's not working, and support change along the way as well. As we said earlier, there's a lot to it. It's not, it takes a long time to change what's taken a long time to be wrong. So we come in to support what good change should look like. I think the hardest, I don't know about you, Dave, but in this type of work that we've found so far is that the hardest place to find change is where organisations have decided that they do it well without really checking on that. Because if we think we do it well, we tend to defend where we sit rather than saying, I'd much rather work with somebody that says, I don't know, or I'm scared to know where to start.
We're not expecting organisations to have all the answers or to know where they're going. All they need to do is identify that they want to be more inclusive, that they want to be part of a society or an industry that is inclusive, and then that's where our consultants can step in and assist in that. So, that, as Andrew alluded to, that may be having a look at, multiple levels of their organisation and policy, and their policies to find out, what's working, what is inclusive, what's exclusive, what is keeping people away from this organisation when it comes to disability. So often organisations are already employing people with disability and they just don't know it yet, right? Because the organisation isn't in a space where the person with a disability feels safe to disclose their disability. And so that can be a part of the work that DisCo does, is creating not just an organisation that is externally accessible and is welcoming to customers, but it was also internally, a safe space for people with disability to identify and to play a fuller role within that organisation as well.
Also great for supporting organisations to understand more what reasonable adjustment looks like. So that if you're employing people, often when organisations look to employ somebody with a disability, they tend to be looking at the disability before they look at the person.
Yeah, the potential costs and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, it's the potential cost, but it's also the potential of if I employ somebody with a disability, I'm doing a good thing, rather than if I employ a person with a disability and I find out what reasonable adjustments they may need in the workplace, then the potential of that employee is obviously compounded, and that employee has the potential to do so much more within the organisation. And there are many supports through job access and other avenues where an organisation can really look into reasonable adjustment without it being of any ongoing cost to the organisation as well. So supporting that's a really useful thing in itself.
Yeah, and those resources are identified by our lived experience consultants as well. So that's again not something that industry has to research themselves. That's where we have a part to play.
Yeah. And I think the funny thing around reasonable adjustment and access is that all too often, if you're making your workplace physically more accessible, it's more accessible for everybody. As a person with low vision, I know that when I look at reasonable adjustment for what works for my computer or my phone, the amount of people that will come up and say, "Oh, where do you get that? I want to try that," because it's
easy to use.
Yeah, exactly. It's much easier to use. So it's about that education and just normalising things.
Yeah.
It's not othering.